They say every grand love story has a twist, but no one expects it to end with heartbreak splashed across front pages. Anna Mendoza was an ordinary woman with extraordinary dreams until she fell in love with the dashing millionaire William Rutherford. Their whirlwind romance dazzled everyone. Charity galas, lavish vacations, and a fairy tale wedding that made headlines. But sometimes, even the most magical stories hide a dark undercurrent. When Anna discovered she was pregnant, William's reaction unleashed a chain of events no one saw coming. Betrayal, revenge, and a shocking exposé that rocked high society. This is the story of how one woman fought back. Anna Mendoza grew up in a modest neighborhood in Austin, Texas. She was the eldest daughter of a mechanic, Miguel Mendoza, and a hard-working nurse, Patricia Mendoza. Money was always tight, but love was abundant in their small home, painted a cheerful turquoise at the corner of Oakwood and Hampton Street. Anna learned early on the values of resilience and kindness. She was taught that hard work trumped shortcuts, and that love was a priceless gift rather than a commodity. Despite these humble beginnings, Anna stood out for her spirit and intelligence. She excelled in her studies, dreaming of one day becoming a journalist who could shed light on injustices around the world. While her ambitions soared, so did her curiosity about life beyond her humble neighborhood. She pored over newspapers and magazines, dissecting news stories and analyzing the high-profile lives of the wealthy. She read about entrepreneurs like Bill Gates and admired how philanthropic giving could change entire communities, yet was often frustrated that powerful people could also remain blind to the struggles of others. After graduating with top honors from a local high school, Anna managed to secure a scholarship to the University of Texas at Austin. She majored in communications and minored in political science, hoping to sharpen her writing skills and focus on global issues. During college, she volunteered at a local newspaper, the Austin Tribune, under the guidance of an old-school editor named Harriet Sullivan, who taught Anna to investigate thoroughly and write passionately. Anna's keen eye for detail and empathetic approach to storytelling gained her recognition. One fateful evening at a charity fundraiser for children's literacy, Anna caught the eye of William Rutherford, a charismatic millionaire investor originally from New York. William was in his late 30s and already known for his wide-ranging portfolio tech startups, real estate, sustainable energy. He was regularly photographed in the society pages, standing beside celebrities like Sofia Vergara and high-profile entrepreneurs at events in Manhattan and Los Angeles. Though unattached officially, the rumor mill frequently speculated about his love life. In person, William radiated the sophistication of old money, but had the hunger for risk, typical of self-made moguls. They locked eyes across the bustling fundraiser. Anna was there reporting for the college news section, taking pictures of the prominent philanthropists in attendance. William, fresh from a business trip to Hong Kong, was leaning casually against a marble pillar, swirling a glass of champagne. Sparks flared when he walked up to her, introduced himself with a smooth confidence, and offered to help sponsor the literacy campaign. Anna was taken aback by how gracious he seemed. He asked about her goals, her volunteer work, and her writing aspirations. That night, she wrote an article featuring William's contribution to the fundraiser. Little did she know her short piece would spark a chain of emails between them. He reached out to thank her for the flattering coverage. She demurred, noting it was just the facts. William, intrigued by her humility and intelligence, invited her out for coffee. Anna accepted, partly out of curiosity, partly because his sophisticated presence was hard to ignore. Their coffee date at a trendy cafe off campus felt like the start of a fantasy. William asked about her background, her dreams, her family, and even her struggles. In turn, Anna learned about his early life. The Rutherfords had once been wealthy landowners, but after his father's series of poor investments, William had to rebuild the family's fortune practically from scratch. He was still deeply shaped by that fall from grace, driving him to fiercely safeguard his successes and carefully manage his public image. Soon, one coffee date turned into dinner dates, which turned into weekend trips. Anna felt she was living someone else's life, flying out to Miami on William's private jet, wearing designer dresses he'd insisted on gifting her, attending philanthropic gatherings in New York and London. Her parents were both proud and worried. They'd never seen Anna so happy yet, so far from home. Meanwhile, Anna found herself in the eye of a social hurricane. Paparazzi occasionally snapped pictures of her, and William gossip blogs wondered about the new mystery woman. Over time, though, she grew used to the media glare. After 2 breathtaking years together, William proposed on the steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. A string quartet played softly in the background, surrounded by discreet security to keep prying cameras away. Anna, shocked but overjoyed, said yes through tears of happiness. They were married 6 months later, in a grand ceremony at a historic estate in the Hamptons. The wedding photos made front-page news in society columns. The millionaire from New York weds the smart Texan journalist. Their first dance was to a live performance of At Last by Etta James's tribute singer. Their honeymoon in Bali was a swirl of rose petals, beach sunsets, and whispered promises of a bright future. For a time, life felt perfect. Anna had a husband who was wealthy, generous, and unbelievably romantic. She'd put her journalism career on temporary hold. At William's request, he insisted she take time to enjoy married life and offered to help her start her own investigative news website whenever she was ready. Love, lavish living, and laughter characterized their initial year of marriage. Yet beneath the glamour, a rift was forming. Anna noticed that William had a controlling streak. He began to question her interactions with male colleagues, criticized her for dressing down when she insisted on wearing comfortable clothes for errands, and discouraged her from pursuing anything that could cast negativity on his investments. She tried to brush these signs aside. After all, he was kind in many ways, and she still believed in his best intentions. Little did Anna know that the cracks in her dream marriage were only going to widen once she discovered she was pregnant, and that the child she carried would become the catalyst for heartbreak and revenge that no one could have predicted Anna had always wanted. A family growing up in a tight-knit household, she envisioned giving her own children the warmth and security she'd once had. Early one morning, after feeling a wave of constant nausea, she decided to pick up a pregnancy test from a pharmacy near their penthouse on 5th Avenue. She took the test in the lavish marble bathroom with trembling hands. 2 lines are positive. Her heart soared with joy, imagining telling William that they were about to be parents. Perhaps, she thought, a baby would bring them closer together. Lately, William's controlling behavior had escalated. He was checking her phone, questioning her every expense. She hoped the news of their child would soften his rough edges, remind him of what truly mattered, beyond wealth and reputation. That evening, she prepared a special dinner at their penthouse, her mother's recipe for chicken enchiladas, fresh guacamole, and a creamy flan for dessert. She was determined to create a warm setting to announce the joyous news. William arrived late, looking harried, a deep furrow in his brow. He barely acknowledged the table filled with her carefully prepared dishes. Anna tried to lighten the mood, guiding him to sit, pouring him a glass of wine, which he accepted absent-mindedly. Then, with a beaming smile, she told him, "William, I'm pregnant. We're having a baby." A long silence followed. William set down his wine and stared at her. Anna expected happiness, relief, anything but the coldness that settled over his features. When he finally spoke, his voice was tight. "Are you certain it's mine?" Anna felt like she'd been slapped. She stammered through confusion and hurt, reminding him that she'd been faithful. But William's eyes burned with suspicion. He muttered about the timing being far from ideal, about how the responsibilities of fatherhood could weigh heavily on his business dealings, about how he needed to be absolutely sure. Anna was stunned. This wasn't the man who had courted her so sweetly, who had claimed to love every part of her soul. In the days that followed, William's behavior grew increasingly distant and dismissive. He demanded a paternity test, subtly casting doubt on Anna's character. Heartbroken Anna agreed to the test, desperate to prove she was telling the truth and to salvage their relationship. The results, of course, showed William was the father, yet his relief was overshadowed by cool calculation rather than joy. Anna overheard hushed phone calls, snippets about prenuptial agreements, potential legal ramifications. Although they had signed a prenup, the baby introduced new elements that might complicate William's finances and public image. One evening he left for a business trip to Silicon Valley and never returned home. Days melted into weeks. Anna tried calling him, texting him, sending emails. His replies were curt and cold. She found out through a business news article that he had flown to London for a series of meetings with technology investors and had spent weekends hobnobbing with wealthy aristocrats in Monaco. All the while, Anna grew more anxious, battling morning sickness and heartbreak in their once cozy penthouse that now felt like a gilded cage. Harriet Sullivan, Anna's old mentor from the Austin Tribune, reached out to see how she was doing. Anna hesitated, but eventually confided that something was deeply wrong in her marriage. Harriet, protective as ever, urged her to not let William walk all over her. Harriet also reminded Anna that her investigative talents could be harnessed to uncover truths even within her personal life. More than once, Harriet said, "Don't forget you have the heart of a reporter. Use it if you need to." One day, Anna woke up and found a note on the dining room table, presumably delivered by one of William's staff in the early morning hours. The message was brief and devastating. William was ending their marriage. He demanded she move out of the penthouse. He wanted no further obligations toward her, except for a financial settlement that his lawyer would draft. Anna felt her entire body go numb, tears streaming down her cheeks as she read the letter. She was 4 months pregnant, exhausted, and tossed aside like an inconvenient piece of baggage. Broken but not beaten, Anna packed her belongings. She left the penthouse that same day, ignoring the sympathetic looks from the staff who had come to care for her. With nowhere else to go in New York, she booked a flight home to Austin. Her father Miguel picked her up from the airport, eyes brimming with concern when he saw his daughter pale and trembling. Though she tried to hold back tears the moment she collapsed into his arms, her anguish poured out. There in her childhood bedroom, Anna clutched her belly and resolved to protect her unborn child from William's cruelty. She also felt an ember of anger spark within her. For the first time, Anna found herself wondering if William had secrets, dark ones, and whether she had been chosen for his agenda rather than for love. In the weeks following her return to Austin, Anna wrestled with heartbreak, embarrassment, and fear about the future. She wanted to believe that William's abandonment was just a temporary lapse in judgment. But her calls and messages continued to go unanswered. His lawyer, a polished man named Maxwell Carmichael, reached out instead with a generous settlement offer and a confidentiality agreement. Anna was shocked by the coldness of it all. She was supposed to hush up her entire relationship, accept a payout, and vanish from William's life. Furious, she refused to sign immediately. Time slowed down in that painful limbo. Her belly grew rounder, a daily reminder of the life inside her, and the father who wanted nothing to do with them. Her parents, though supportive, were worried about finances. Patricia had just been through a health scare and was too weak to keep working. Double shifts, Miguel's mechanic shop needed urgent repairs and new equipment. Anna began to wonder if taking William's settlement might be the pragmatic move for the sake of her family and the baby. Yet a deeper instinct told her not to cave, that something about William's abrupt shift was more than just a selfish decision. There was something bigger beneath the surface. Determined to find answers, she contacted Harriet Sullivan again. Harriet visited Anna in Austin, taking her out for lunch at a cozy cafe, over steaming mugs of peppermint tea. Anna confided all the abrupt abandonment, the soulless note, the financial settlement, hush money. Harriet listened gravely, then offered a suggestion that would set Anna on the path of discovery. Investigate William's recent business dealings. Maybe his sudden decision to discard her had roots in hidden debts, shady partnerships, or an upcoming scandal that fatherhood would complicate. Energized by Harriet's idea, Anna began quietly digging. She scoured financial news articles, looking for clues about William Rutherford's ventures: Rutherford Real Estate Group, Rutherford Tech, Investments, Rutherford, Sustainable Energy. His empire seemed unstoppable. But then she stumbled on a line in a niche finance blog referencing Rutherford's questionable offshore accounts. A few more days of searching led her to a bigger puzzle. There were rumors that William had allegedly manipulated stock prices for one of his tech startups, WeConnect, by feeding false projections to investors. Officially, everything looked squeaky clean, but whispers in the finance community suggested otherwise. Anna also discovered an SEC inquiry had been launched quietly. No mainstream media source had covered it yet. A potential scandal of that magnitude could topple a man like William Rutherford. His image as a philanthropic sweetheart would be replaced by the label of a fraudster. Anna's journalistic instincts flared to life. Could William's decision to cut ties with her be part of a strategy to protect his empire? Perhaps he believed a pregnant wife, someone who might discover and reveal his secrets, was a liability. Or maybe he feared that if the scandal broke, she'd become an unwilling accomplice. Still, Anna needed more concrete evidence. She set up phone calls with ex-employees of Rutherford's companies, speaking under the guise of a journalist doing a feature. She reached out to old acquaintances in New York's philanthropic circles. She even ventured into the dark corners of online finance forums. Piece by piece, a disturbing picture emerged. William was rumored to be funneling investor money into personal projects, using shell companies registered in Caribbean havens to mask suspicious transactions. Though Anna lacked the smoking gun, the circumstantial evidence pointed to major financial misdeeds, and it was all hush-hush, probably because people feared William's litigious nature. Meanwhile, Anna had to face her personal challenges: doctor's appointments, the emotional toll of impending single motherhood, and the swirling confusion of heartbreak. Sleep grew elusive. She'd toss and turn in her childhood bed, glancing at her phone, hoping for a message from William that never came. Instead, Maxwell Carmichael's legal team kept sending her urgent requests to sign the settlement. They threatened that her refusal to comply would end in a drawn-out legal battle and zero support for the baby. Anna resolved that before she made any decision, she needed that smoking gun. She had to know the truth about William's underhanded dealings. If he was indeed committing financial crimes, she'd use that as leverage to ensure her child's future and reveal his true nature. If she discovered nothing, she'd sign the settlement, walk away, and pray for peace. The next day, she booked a flight to New York, telling her concerned parents that she needed just a few days to settle her business. Harriet agreed to meet her there. Donning a brave face and a trench coat that used to fit her better before pregnancy, Anna stepped back into the city that had once felt so glamorous, determined to uncover the truth about the man she had married. Anna checked into a modest hotel on the Lower East Side, far from the five-star accommodations she used to frequent with William. She used Harriet's press credentials to set up interviews under the pretext of writing a piece on philanthropy and tech entrepreneurs. Under that cover story, Anna managed to speak with lower-level employees in William's venture capital offices. Most were tight-lipped. William paid well, and loyalty ran deep. But a few discreetly hinted at suspicious transactions, though they were too scared to go on record. Desperate for more, Anna rummaged through corporate filings at the local business registries. Harriet helped cross-reference addresses and scanned through old newspaper archives for anything linking Rutherford's companies to known shell entities or past controversies. It was an uphill battle. William's legal team was adept at burying digital footprints, but Harriet had taught Anna the importance of patience in investigative work. If you keep searching, eventually a thread will appear. Their breakthrough came from an unlikely source, an accountant named Linda Farnsworth, who had once worked at Rutherford Tech Investments. Anna discovered Linda's name buried in a public lawsuit docket. She had sued Rutherford Tech for wrongful termination and settled out of court. After some coaxing, Linda agreed to meet Anna in a quiet bookstore cafe away from prying eyes. When Anna showed up, Linda looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder as if she expected to be followed. "It's not safe for me to talk about this," Linda whispered, her fingers trembling around a cup of chamomile tea. "I signed an NDA. I could lose everything if I reveal details." Anna leaned in, speaking softly, but with urgency. "I'm William's wife," she said, voice breaking. "He left me. I'm pregnant with his child, and I suspect he's involved in something illegal. I don't know what to do. Please, Linda. Anything you can tell me might help me protect my baby, protect myself." Seeing Anna's distress, Linda's expression softened. She began carefully explaining how, during her time at Rutherford Tech, she noticed large sums of money being transferred between several accounts that didn't match any official projects. She tried flagging it to her superiors, but they fired her under dubious circumstances. The settlement was quick and generous, provided she remained silent about her discoveries. Linda couldn't share documents; those were locked away. But the names of the suspicious accounts were forever etched in her memory. She scribbled a few cryptic references on a napkin: HT Holding, Nova Horizons, East Lake Consulting. Then she added, "They're all linked, different addresses, but all roads lead to a private trust in the Cayman Islands." An electric surge ran through Anna's veins. She now had a lead. If she could tie these shell companies directly to William and track the money trail, it could confirm his involvement in fraud or embezzlement. She thanked Linda profusely, promising to keep her name out of it. The accountant left quickly, her eyes filled with a mix of guilt and relief. Armed with these leads, Anna and Harriet dove back into research mode. They discovered that HT Holding had a small office address listed in Brooklyn, likely a front. Anna decided to check it out in person, though Harriet warned her to be cautious. One cold, drizzling morning, Anna took a taxi to the address, her heart pounding. The building was a run-down warehouse with no visible signage. She tried the door. It was locked. Peering through the dirty windows, she saw only dusty boxes and a reception desk stacked with unopened mail. Suddenly, a heavy-set man in a dark suit stepped out from behind the warehouse. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice gruff. Anna froze. She recognized him. He was one of William's security guards, often seen at social events. Her blood ran cold, murmuring an apology about being lost. She hurried away as quickly as she could, ignoring the guard's suspicious gaze. That moment cemented her fears William had layers of protection around his shady dealings, and if she dug too deep, she might be putting herself in danger. Returning to the hotel, she found Harriet waiting anxiously. Harriet's own research had yielded more references to shell entities linked to Rutherford's circle, though none directly named William. Still, it was enough for Anna to suspect that William was funneling money illegally. Harriet suggested they approach a major newspaper or an online investigative platform with what they had. But Anna wasn't ready. She needed a direct link, something that would unequivocally tie William to these accounts. Without that, it could be brushed off as rumors or personal vendettas. That night, Harriet left to meet a colleague, and Anna was alone in her hotel room. Half asleep, she heard her phone vibrate. The call was from an unknown number. A raspy voice hissed, "Stop poking your nose where it doesn't belong. Sign the settlement and walk away. You don't want to bring trouble on yourself or your baby." Before Anna could respond, the line went dead, shaken to her core. Anna realized the fight she was in was far more dangerous than she anticipated, but instead of scaring her off, it fueled her determination. She refused to be intimidated by shadowy threats. Memories of her father's advice floated back to her. Right is right, even if it's hard. You can't let fear control you. Besides, after everything William had done, Bonner wouldn't let him get away with hurting her, abandoning his child, and possibly defrauding countless investors. Her unborn baby deserved justice, and she intended to secure it. The following day, Harriet arranged for Anna to meet a trusted investigative journalist, Mark Underwood, who worked for a reputable national paper. Mark had reported on corporate fraud cases before including high-profile exposés that led to resignations and lawsuits over coffee. Anna laid out her findings and expressed her fear that she didn't yet have the definitive proof to implicate William Rutherford. She needed Mark's network resources and expertise to solidify the story. Mark was intrigued. He agreed that the thread linking William to the shell accounts was the story's linchpin. "We need actual transaction data or testimonies from insiders who can confirm Rutherford's direct involvement," he said, scanning through Anna's notes. "Otherwise, it's circumstantial." While Harriet believed Mark could be trusted, Anna felt torn. If they went public too soon, William's legal team would discredit her as a spiteful ex-wife. She also risked him shutting down any remaining leads. Mark, sensing her internal conflict, reassured her they'd keep everything confidential until they had a rock-solid case. "But we've got to move quickly," he warned. "Money flows in and out of these shells fast. If Rutherford knows we're close, he'll bury them over the next few days." Anna collaborated with Mark's newspaper's research team, cross-referencing data from corporate registries and banking disclosures. She noticed that Harriet was uncharacteristically silent sometimes, leaving for hours without explanation. Anna guessed Harriet might have her own methods for unearthing information. She also found herself wishing she could confide everything to her family, but she didn't want to burden her mother and father with fear for her safety. At 5 months pregnant, her body was going through changes that left her exhausted, but she pushed through, driven by a fierce love for her unborn child. While scanning an SEC filing late one evening at the newspaper's office, Anna felt a sudden sharp pain in her abdomen. Alarmed, she tried to breathe steadily, telling herself it was just stress. She ended up in the break room, hands shaking. Mark found her pale and sweating, insisting on driving her to the nearest hospital. After an anxious examination, the doctor assured her the baby was fine, but warned her about overexertion. "You must reduce stress," he stressed. "Your child's health depends on it." That night, lying in a hospital bed, Anna realized she was treading a dangerous line. Should she sign the settlement, vanish from William's world, and give her baby a secure, if silent, future? Or should she keep pushing for the truth and risk everything? Images of William's betrayal collided with thoughts of the baby's uncertain future if Anna didn't secure child support. Then she remembered her father's words and Harriet's unwavering support. "You have the heart of a reporter." Harriet had said Anna couldn't live with herself if she walked away from the biggest story of her life, a story that was also deeply personal. She checked out of the hospital the next morning, resolving to push forward, but promising herself she'd be mindful of her health. Upon returning to the newspaper's office, Mark greeted her with an urgent expression. "We got something," he said quietly. A confidential source had provided partial access to some offshore transaction records. Among them was a reference to a W. Rutherford initiating a transfer to Nova Horizons, one of the shell companies Linda had mentioned. This was the first direct naming of William in the context of an overseas funnel. Mark believed they could use it to pressure more sources to come forward. Excitement and dread warred inside Anna. They finally had a tangible link, but it was still incomplete, just a single transaction. Nonetheless, they decided to approach a forensic accountant to verify its authenticity. If it checked out, they would be one step closer to undeniable evidence. The forensic accountant confirmed that the transaction was real, but cautioned that William's legal team would attempt to discredit the leak or claim that the W. Rutherford on record was someone else. They needed a pattern of transactions, an unequivocal paper trail. Just as Anna was preparing for another day of digital sleuthing, she received a call from Harriet, who sounded breathless. "Meet me at the place you first started digging, the coffee shop on 42nd Street." Harriet said, confused but trusting her mentor. Anna hailed a cab. When she arrived, Harriet handed her a small manila envelope, eyes glittering with excitement. "I told you, I had a few tricks up my sleeve," Harriet said. Inside the envelope were copies of bank statements linking multiple transactions from William Rutherford's personal trust to Nova Horizons Eastlake Consulting and several other shell entities. There were timestamps, official bank stamps, enough to create a damning mosaic of fraudulent activity. Anna gaped at Harriet. How Harriet just gave a knowing smile. "I'm an old reporter with old connections. Let's just say, not everyone in Rutherford's circle is loyal to him anymore. Word travels fast when someone abandons a pregnant wife." Tears pricked Anna's eyes. She hugged Harriet, whispering her thanks. With these documents, they had everything needed to reveal William's crimes. Anna sat at the edge of the bed in Harriet's apartment, the morning light filtering through gauzy curtains. Her heart raced, though she tried to still it, with deep, steady breaths. On the table before her lay the manila envelope, simple, unassuming, yet filled with the power to tear down. An empire inside were irrefutable documents, bank statements, time-stamped transactions, the names of shell companies, all linked directly to William Rutherford. It was everything. Proof not only of his betrayal as a husband, but of his crimes as a public figure. Harriet's eyes sparkled with quiet pride as she poured Anna a cup of mint tea. "You ready?" she asked gently, placing the warm mug beside her. Anna's hand trembled slightly as she reached for it. The tea was meant to soothe, but nothing could dull the storm brewing inside her. "I don't know if I'm ready," Anna admitted, "but I know I have to do this." Mark Underwood, the seasoned journalist from the national paper, met them downstairs. His usual stoic expression had softened. He understood what this moment meant. They hailed a cab and rode in tense silence to the Midtown office of William's attorney, Maxwell Carmichael. The law firm was sleek, modern, sterile marble floors, glass walls, receptionists with emotionless smiles. As Anna stepped off the elevator, her baby shifted inside her, a small nudge against her ribs, as if reminding her, "I'm with you." Carmichael greeted them with that same smug, polished facade Anna remembered from earlier settlement talks. He gestured toward a conference room. "I assume this is about the settlement," he said smoothly, eyeing her belly as if it were an inconvenience Anna didn't answer. Instead, she opened the envelope and slid the documents across the table. For a moment, no one spoke. Carmichael's confident posture faltered as his eyes scanned the contents. The color drained from his face. His fingers twitched at the corner of the page, as if he wanted to tear the papers apart, but knew better. "Where did you get these?" he asked, voice low and sharp. Anna met his gaze, unwavering. "That's not your concern. What matters is that the truth is here, in black and white." Harriet leaned in her voice, calm but firm. "These documents have been independently verified by forensic accountants. Every stamp, every signature, every transfer is legitimate." Mark added, "Our legal team is prepared to move forward with publication, but in the spirit of journalistic ethics, we're offering William the chance to respond before the story goes live." For the first time, the smooth-talking attorney looked rattled. He leaned back in his chair, jaw clenched. "You realize the damage this will cause, not just to William, but to you as well. Public backlash, legal warfare. Is that really what you want?" Anna swallowed hard. Her chest ached not from fear, but from years of suppressed truth, of love given and abused. "What I want," she said slowly, "is for my child to grow up knowing that his mother didn't cower, that I stood up for what was right." Carmichael's tone changed. "Let's be civil. We can make this go away. How much do you want to keep this quiet?" The words hung in the air like poison. Anna blinked. For a moment, she was back in that penthouse kitchen, setting down a homemade meal, announcing her pregnancy, with hope in her voice. Only now did she fully see the rot that had existed behind the marble countertops and designer suits. "You're offering me a bribe," she said coldly, "to bury the truth, to protect a man who left his pregnant wife and stole from thousands of investors." Carmichael began to protest, but Mark pressed a button on a small recorder in his pocket. The red light blinked. "I wouldn't deny anything. You've said so far," he said, with a razor's edge in his tone. Harriet leaned forward. "You know what's coming, and you know your client can't escape it." Silence fell again. Carmichael's confidence had withered. He stood stiffly, straightened his tie. "You'll destroy William's entire legacy with this. He'll retaliate." "Don't think he won't." Anna stood too. Her belly led the way, round and full of promise. "He destroyed himself," she said. "This is just the world seeing him for who he really is." With that, they walked out. The doors to the firm clicked shut behind them, like the closing of a chapter. Outside, the city roared as usual. Horns, footsteps, the hum of people going about their lives. But for Anna, the world had gone silent for a moment. A great weight had lifted. The wind swept through the streets, and Anna inhaled deeply. Harriet placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You did it. She didn't feel victorious yet. That would come later. But in that instant, Anna felt something she hadn't in months, 3 days. That's how long it took for Anna's world to change again. On the morning of the 3rd day, Anna stood by the window in Harriet's apartment, holding a warm cup of chamomile tea, her fingers wrapped tightly around the ceramic, like it was the only thing grounding her. Outside New York pulsed with life. Unaware that it was about to be shaken by a story too big to ignore, the article went live at exactly 8:07 a.m. Charitable financier or fraudster allegations mount against millionaire investor William Rutherford. The headline was bold-centered. Impossible to look away from Mark Underwood's byline appeared just beneath it, alongside a small note with contributions from Harriet Sullivan and an anonymous source close to Rutherford. Anna's heart thudded as she scrolled. There it was, the full expose. Every detail, every transaction, every shell company, each account tied back to William. The documents Harriet had secured were featured as exhibits. But what drew Anna's eyes most were the words Mark had chosen to describe her. A woman betrayed, but not broken. A mother who refused to be silenced. A journalist who became the story she was born to write. By noon, the story had gone viral. National outlets reposted it. International ones translated it. Financial blogs tore through the implications. Pundits on cable news panels debated whether William Rutherford was merely ethically murky or a full-blown criminal, and social media. It exploded. Anna's face, captured in old paparazzi shots from galas and gala nights, smiling beside William in designer gowns, was now plastered across feeds with hashtags like pregnant whistleblower, Rutherford scandal, and disturbingly, gold digger or heroine. I can't believe how fast this is moving, Anna whispered, setting down her phone, hands trembling. Harriet turned from the kitchen, a pot of soup bubbling behind her. You lit the match, sweetheart. Now watch the fire burn. But the fire didn't burn evenly. William's response was swift and brutal. By evening, his PR machine had kicked into full gear. Polished statements were released, denying everything. The documents were fabricated. The accusations, vindictive and orchestrated. And Anna. According to them, she was a scorned, unstable woman, attempting to extort a respectable businessman. They went further. They leaked private details of Anna's past. Her college essays, her social media posts from years ago, even misrepresented her academic work to imply she had radical views. The same woman who once posed beside William at galas was now being painted as a manipulative social climber. The smear campaign hit hard. Trolls flooded Anna's inbox. Comments appeared under every post about the article. Some sympathetic, others venomous. You trapped him with that baby. She was always after his money. Typical journalist lies for fame. Anna tried to block it out. She kept reminding herself. This was about the truth, about justice, about Matteo. But when her father called from Austin, his voice shaking, she nearly broke Anna. There's reporters outside the shop. They're asking questions, shoving cameras in my face. Your mother's not doing well. Her blood pressure's high. I'm so sorry, Dad. She choked out. Miguel's voice softened. You did the right thing, mija. But it's going to be a rough storm. You hold on, you hear me? You hold on for that baby. The next day, things escalated again. William filed a defamation lawsuit, not just against the newspaper or Mark, but against Harriet and even Anna herself. He also requested a restraining order, accusing Anna of harassment. The irony nearly made her laugh, if it didn't hurt so much. At that point, Anna moved in full-time with Harriet for safety. Paparazzi lingered outside. Strangers took photos of her baby bump like it was tabloid gold. She tried to keep calm, to stay grounded. She began talking to her baby, more as if the tiny heartbeat within her could keep her own steady. "You're not just my reason to keep going," she whispered one night as she lay awake. "You're my proof that love still means something." And then, amid the chaos, came a call. A woman's voice, crisp and clear. Anna Mendoza. "My name is Dr. Cynthia Rollins. Harriet gave me your information. I'm an OB-GYN, and I'd like to offer you prenatal care, free of charge." Anna blinked, tears already gathering. Why, she asked, voice cracking. "Because what you're doing takes more strength than most people ever have, and I think you and your baby deserve someone in your corner." That night, Anna wept, not from fear or anger, but from gratitude. Weeks passed, and with every day, William's foundation crumbled more. Investors began pulling out. His board members resigned. And then came the moment Anna didn't expect. So soon, a federal investigation was announced. The charges were real. The government was watching. Still, it wasn't over. One night, unable to sleep, Anna scrolled social media. Despite Harriet's warning, a private message popped up. A user with no profile picture, no real name. "I used to work for Rutherford. I have more proof." Emails direct from him. He knew what he was doing. Anna's fingers hovered over the keyboard. A trap. "A lifeline with caution," she replied. Hours later, Mark had the emails, messages from William himself, discussing SEC regulations, skirting legal boundaries, laughing off accountability. That was the final crack. William's attorney, Maxwell Carmichael, was rumored to have stepped down. The man who once sneered across polished conference tables now disappeared from the spotlight altogether. But Anna, she stood firm. She was no longer the dumped wife. She was the woman who exposed a lie too big to ignore, who stood tall through the firestorm, who carried not just a child, but the truth. And through it all, Matteo kicked in her belly, like he knew his mother had won the first of many battles for them both. The courtroom smelled of polished wood and cold resolve. Anna sat quietly at the plaintiff's table, 8 months pregnant, and wrapped in a navy blue maternity dress that hugged her belly like armor. Her hands rested protectively atop the swell of her child fingers, intertwined in a gentle prayer for strength. Around her, the air was heavy with anticipation. Journalists scribbling in notepads, murmurs from the public gallery, the low hum of microphones being tested. Across the room sat William Rutherford. Gone was the charismatic mogul, in tailored suits and confident smirks. His skin looked drawn, his eyes sunken. He wore a dark suit that seemed to hang loose on him, as if he were shrinking under the weight of the allegations. When their eyes met just for a heartbeat, Anna saw not the man who once whispered vows beneath chandeliers, but a stranger consumed by self-preservation. The trial had officially begun. A grand jury had indicted William on multiple counts: wire fraud, securities, violations, money laundering. The culmination of months of investigation, whistleblower accounts, forensic documentation, and Anna's courage. She had been subpoenaed to testify. As she made her way to the witness stand, each step felt like a mile. The courtroom fell silent, all eyes on the woman who had become a symbol of betrayal, of resilience, of justice. The bailiff held out a Bible. Anna placed her hand atop it, swore the oath, and sat. Her voice, though soft, carried weight. She told the truth, not just the facts, but the emotional toll. How William had walked out without warning. How she had been left to navigate pregnancy alone. How suspicion turned into discovery. And how she unearthed secrets meant to stay buried. Her hands trembled at times, her throat caught, but she never faltered. "I didn't set out to ruin anyone," she said, glancing toward the jury. "I just wanted to understand why someone I loved turned so cold. I didn't expect to find crime. But once I did, I couldn't look away." William sat motionless, eyes burning holes through the floor. Then came the cross-examination. His defense attorney, sharp and theatrical, attempted to flip the narrative. He painted Anna as vengeful, manipulative, driven by jealousy. He questioned her motives, her character, even her credibility as a journalist. "Isn't it true," he sneered, "that you were desperate for attention, that your investigation was really just an elaborate act of revenge?" Anna looked at the attorney, then to the jury. "No," she said simply. "What I was desperate for was the truth. For my child, for the people William hurt." Her composure silenced the room. Linda Farnsworth, the former accountant, who had first shared the names of the shell companies, also took the stand. Her voice quivered, but her testimony was devastating. She confirmed the suspicious money transfers, the internal warnings, ignored the fear of retaliation. Other former employees testified anonymously, describing a culture of secrecy and intimidation. The prosecution laid out its case with methodical precision: bank records, email chains, witness statements. Piece by piece, the image of William Rutherford as a titan of industry crumbled. The jury could see what Anna had seen long ago. A man so obsessed with power, he'd risk everything, including a family, to preserve it. During breaks, Anna stepped outside to breathe. Journalists hounded her for quotes, but she said little. Her thoughts were focused inward on the life growing inside her. At night, she curled up in Harriet's guest room, Matteo kicking gently as if to remind her, "We're almost through." Then came the verdict. The jury deliberated for just under 4 hours. Anna sat holding Harriet's hand, her heart pounding so loudly she almost didn't hear the foreperson speak. Guilty. On multiple counts. William didn't speak, didn't flinch, but Anna saw his jaw twitch, his nostrils flare. He looked less like a man facing justice and more like a cornered animal, realizing the trap had finally sprung shut. Tears welled in Anna's eyes, not out of joy or triumph, but something deeper, a quiet grief. This wasn't just the end of a trial, it was the death of an illusion. The man she once thought she loved no longer existed. Maybe he never had. Outside the courthouse, reporters flooded forward, flashbulbs, microphones, questions shouted from every direction. Anna stepped up to the podium. Her voice again was soft but firm. "I didn't choose this path, but I chose not to stay silent. This case was never just about me. It was about truth, accountability, and what happens when powerful people think they're untouchable. I'm grateful the justice system worked, and now I'm going home to prepare for the most important role of my life, being a mother." She turned her chin high as Harriet and Mark flanked her protectively. Later that evening, Anna watched the news in silence. Pregnant wife topples tycoon. The headlines read, her face now, familiar to millions, flickered across the screen. But the woman looking back wasn't the same girl who once swooned in a private jet, dressed in borrowed diamonds. No, this woman was steel and warmth, fire and grace, The media attention was overwhelming, but Anna managed it on her own terms. She granted 2 interviews, one with a women's magazine, one with a major network, and in both she spoke not of revenge, but of responsibility. "I just want my son to grow up in a world where truth still matters," she said. And though critics still lingered in comment sections, their voices were now drowned by the flood of support letters, emails, care packages from strangers who saw her not as a scandal, but as a symbol of hope. With the child support and damages enforced by the court, Anna set up a modest trust fund for Matteo. She used a portion to begin something small but powerful, a non-profit newsroom dedicated to mentoring young women in investigative journalism, especially those from underrepresented communities. She named it the Sullivan Project, after the woman who had reminded her of her worth when she'd almost forgotten it. And through it all, each meeting, each call, each quiet night, feeding hope to the future, Anna stayed grounded by one undeniable truth. She had spoken, she had fought, she had won, and soon she would hold her son, knowing she had given him not just life, but legacy. In the last month of her pregnancy, Anna returned to Austin to be surrounded by family. Under Dr. Rollins's care, she gave birth to a baby boy she named Matteo Miguel Rutherford, keeping William's surname only so that the child would one day know his paternal identity. For better or worse, Matteo was born healthy, with a full head of dark hair that reminded Anna of her own baby pictures. Holding Matteo in her arms for the first time, Anna felt a surge of unconditional love, all the pain, the betrayal, the fear. It seemed distant in that moment. She vowed to devote herself to raising him with integrity, teaching him the values her parents had instilled in her. Her father, Miguel, wept tears of joy upon seeing his grandson, Patricia. Though frail, smiled brightly whenever she held the baby, whispering blessings in Spanish. 2 weeks later, while Anna was still recovering, Harriet stopped by with an envelope in hand. Inside was a short letter from William Rutherford, written from the Federal Detention Center. It was a strange mix of regret and bitterness. He denied some of the accusations, insisted he had truly loved Anna in his own way, and asked for a chance to see his son someday. Anna reread the letter multiple times, her emotions swirling anger, pity, sorrow. She penned a measured response, telling him that if he was sincere, he could start by admitting responsibility and taking steps toward restitution. She didn't promise visitation rights or forgiveness, only expressing that Matteo would learn the truth no matter what. Whether William chose to be a part of it in a positive way would be up to him. She mailed it and resolved not to dwell on it any further. In the months that followed, Anna began freelancing for major news outlets, focusing on corporate accountability stories. She found renewed purpose in her journalism, becoming an advocate for whistleblowers and pregnant women facing discrimination. Mark Underwood continued to publish hard-hitting exposés, sometimes consulting Anna for her insights. Harriet Sullivan returned to semi-retirement, but remained a guiding force in Anna's life, a maternal figure in the professional world. Word spread about Anna's work ethic and fearless reporting. Invitations to speak at conferences trickled in. She accepted only a few, wanting to balance her professional endeavors with the demands of motherhood. She was no longer the timid, starry-eyed girl who fell in love with a charming millionaire. She had become a woman who understood the power of truth, the necessity of courage, and the unbreakable bond of motherhood. And so life moved on. William Rutherford's downfall became a cautionary tale, a fleeting reference in the annals of corporate crime. Meanwhile, Anna's story wasn't just the pregnant wife who got dumped. It was about a woman who refused to stay silent in the face of betrayal, who discovered the strength within herself to stand up against corruption, and who ultimately emerged with something more valuable than all the millions in the world: a child she loved beyond measure, and a soul tempered by fire but unbroken. And that, dear viewers, is the remarkable, harrowing, and ultimately triumphant story of Ana Mendoza, the pregnant wife who was discarded by a millionaire but refused to be silenced. From her humble beginnings in Austin to standing up in a courtroom packed with cameras, she showed that love betrayed can transform into an unshakable resolve for justice. While William Rutherford's empire crumbled under the weight of his own deceit, Anna found her true purpose: mother to her precious son, and fierce advocate for truth. If this story moved you, please show your support by hitting the like button, sharing the video with friends who love real-life drama and redemption stories, and subscribing to our channel for more powerful narratives. Your engagement helps us reach more people who might find inspiration in Anna's bravery. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned for our next deep dive drama. What happens when a fairy tale marriage turns into a public nightmare? For Elara Thorne, the grand ballroom of the St. Regis, shimmering with crystal and old money, was supposed to be a celebration of her husband's success. She stood by his side, a perfect picture of devotion, her couture gown flowing over the gentle curve of her 8-month pregnancy. He was the prince of New York real estate. She was his adoring wife, carrying their heir. But in one glittering champagne-fueled moment, her prince would reveal himself to be a monster, and the facade of their perfect life would not just crack, it would eclode before the city's elite. The air in their Park Avenue penthouse was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and unspoken resentment. Elara Thorne adjusted the midnight blue silk of her custom Serafina gown, her fingers tracing the delicate embroidery that struggled to distract from the taut, heavy sphere of her belly. At 8.5 months pregnant, she felt less like a goddess of fertility and more like a ship navigating treacherous waters. Every movement was a negotiation, every breath a conscious effort. "Are you almost ready?" Julian's voice, smooth as polished granite, cut through the silence from the master suite's doorway. He stood there already, a vision of tailored perfection in his Tom Ford tuxedo. Julian Thorne didn't just wear clothes, he inhabited them, his confidence a magnetic field that bent the world to his will. "Almost," Elara murmured, turning to face him. She had chosen the dress weeks ago, hoping it would make her feel elegant, ethereal. Now, under his critical gaze, she felt large, cumbersome. His eyes swept over her, a swift, almost imperceptible inventory that managed to miss her hopeful expression entirely. "That color. It makes you look rather pale, don't you think?" The comment landed like a small, sharp stone in her chest. It wasn't overtly cruel, but it was Julian's specialty. The subtle erosion of her confidence, chipping away at her piece by piece until she felt like a ruin. "I thought it brought out my eyes," she offered weakly, her hand instinctively going to her stomach, where their son was currently practicing his kicks. He grunted, turning his attention to his platinum cufflinks. "The car is downstairs. Beatrice is already texting, wondering where we are. You know how she gets about punctuality at these things." Beatrice Thorne, Julian's mother, was a woman who believed tardiness was a moral failing on par with grand larceny. The event, the Thorne Foundation's annual Starlight Gala, was the crown jewel of her social calendar and Julian's biggest philanthropic display of the year. It was an evening dedicated to raising money for underprivileged children, a cause that felt deeply ironic, given how little attention Julian paid to his own impending fatherhood. "I just need to put on my shoes," Elara said, moving towards the velvet ottoman. The simple act of bending down was a monumental task. She gritted her teeth, her back screaming in protest, as she fumbled with the delicate straps of her Jimmy Choos. Julian watched her struggle for a moment, his expression unreadable before sighing with theatrical impatience. "For God's sake, Elara, we'll be late." He didn't move to help. He simply stood there, a handsome statue of irritation. Tears pricked at the back of her eyes, hot and unwelcome. She swallowed them down, a familiar cocktail of humiliation and frustration. This was their life now. The loving glances had been replaced by critical stares, the tender touches by impatient sighs. The man who had once written her poetry and flown her to Paris for a weekend now looked at her as if she were a line item on his balance sheet that was underperforming. She blamed the pregnancy at first, the hormones, the changes to her body, the shift in their social life. But the coldness had started before that, a creeping frost that began when his real estate empire, Thorn Global Properties, had secured the landmark Hudson Yards redevelopment deal. His success had inflated his ego to terrifying proportions, leaving little room for anything or anyone else. Finally securing the shoes, she stood up, her breath coming in short, shallow bursts. "Okay, I'm ready." He gave her another once-over, his lips a thin, displeased line. "Try to stand up straight tonight. The slouching doesn't help." He then turned and walked out, leaving the words hanging in the air like poison. As she followed his imposing figure through their cavernous apartment, her hand once again found her belly. The baby kicked a strong, reassuring thump against her palm. "It's just you and me, little one." She thought, a wave of fierce, protective love washing over her. "It's always been just you and me." The ride down in the private elevator was silent. The air in the chauffeured Maybach was colder still. Julian was on his phone, his thumb flying across the screen, a small, secretive smile playing on his lips as he texted. Elara looked out the window, watching the glittering lights of Manhattan blur past. Each light represented a life, a story, a world of its own. Her own world, once so bright and full of promise, felt like it was shrinking, dimming, collapsing in on itself, until the only thing left was the hollow echo of what used to be. She was Mrs. Julian Thorne, a name that unlocked any door in the city. But tonight it felt less like a title and more like the name of a very beautiful, very expensive core. The grand ballroom of the St. Regis was a symphony of excess. 3-tiered crystal chandeliers, each the size of a small car, dripped light onto a sea of 1,000 guests. The air hummed with the murmur of powerful conversations, the clinking of champagne flutes, and the soft strains of a live jazz quartet. This was Julian's kingdom, and as they entered, he transformed. The cold, dismissive husband from the penthouse melted away, replaced by Julian Thorne, the charismatic titan, the beloved philanthropist. He clasped shoulders, kissed cheeks, and laughed a deep, resonant laugh that made women blush and men feel impotent. Elara was the accessory on his arm, the silent, smiling testament to his perfect life. Julian darling. Beatrice Thorne descended upon them, a formidable figure in emerald green taffeta and a fortress of diamonds. Her smile was as bright and hard as her jewelry. "You're late, fashionably, mother," Julian said, kissing the air beside her cheek. Beatrice's eyes, the same piercing blue, as her sons raked over Ilara. "Ilara, dear, that dress is a bold choice. The Navy is so draining when one is already feeling tired." "I feel wonderful, Beatrice, thank you," Ilara replied, forcing a smile that felt like cracking plaster. Beatrice's attention had already shifted back to her son. "All the important donors are by the silent auction. Councilman Miller is here, and I think I saw Robert Harrison from the board of MoMA. You must go and charm them." She shooed him away as if dismissing a servant. Julian gave Ilara's arm a perfunctory squeeze. "Mingle," he commanded under his breath. "And for heaven's sake, try to look happy. People are watching." He was gone in an instant, absorbed into a throng of influential figures, leaving Ilara standing alone at the edge of the glittering crowd. She felt like a buoy cut loose from its mooring adrift in an ocean of strangers who looked through her as if she were glass. She found a quiet spot near a marble column, accepting a glass of sparkling water from a passing waiter. From her vantage point, she could watch the room. She could watch Julian. He was magnificent, she had to admit. He moved with an innate predatory grace, his charisma a tangible force. And then she saw her, Serena Vance. Serena was the lead counsel for a rival development firm, a woman known for being as brilliant as she was ruthless. She was everything Ilara was not sharp-edged, impossibly chic, in a silver form-fitting gown, her blonde hair cut in a severe, stylish bob. She and Julian were professional adversaries, yet they were laughing together, their heads bent close. There was an intimacy in their posture, a shared energy that made Ilara's stomach clench. It wasn't the first time she had seen them like this. At other events, she'd noticed their prolonged conversations, the way his eyes would follow Serena across a room. She'd told herself it was just business, professional respect. But the secretive smile on Julian's face as he texted in the car flashed in her mind. It was the same smile he was giving Serena Vance right now. "If looks could kill, that woman would be a pile of ash," a familiar voice said beside her. Ilara started turning to see her best friend, Chloe. Chloe was an art gallery owner with a no-nonsense attitude and an allergy to phoniness, which made her presence at an event like this a true act of solidarity. "I don't know what you're talking about." Ilara lied, her gaze still fixed on Julian and Serena. "Don't you?" Chloe followed her line of sight. "Ah, the Ice Queen and the Idiot King, a match made in corporate hell." Chloe took a sip of her champagne. "Listen, Ilara, we need to talk." "Not here, Chloe." "Yes, here." Chloe insisted, her voice low and urgent. "I had a drink with a friend from law school last week. He works at Serena's firm. He said the whispers are getting louder, that Thorne and Vance aren't just professional rivals anymore." Ilara's heart began to beat, a frantic, painful rhythm against her ribs. Whispers. What whispers? That their rivalry is just a cover, that they're working on something together, a backdoor deal, and that their partnership isn't strictly business. The floor seemed to tilt beneath Ilara's feet. She gripped the marble column for support. She had suspected. She had felt it in her bones for months. The late nights at the office, the unexplained business trips, the growing emotional chasm between them. But hearing it spoken aloud, given voice by someone else, made it terrifyingly real. "He wouldn't," she whispered, trying to convince herself. "Not now. Not with the baby coming." Chloe's expression softened with pity. "Oh, honey, men like Julian don't see a baby as a reason to be faithful. They see it as a cage they need to escape from. And Serena Vance is the shiniest escape hatch in Manhattan." Just then a sharp, unfamiliar pain shot through Alara's lower back. She gasped, her hand flying to the spot. "Are you okay?" Chloe asked, her face etched with concern. "You're as white as a sheet." "I'm fine," Alara breathed, forcing the pain down. "It's just Braxton Hicks. The doctor said to expect them." But it felt different, sharper, more insistent. The baby shifted violently inside her as if he too could sense the poison in the air. She looked back across the room. Julian had placed a hand on the small of Serena Vance's back, guiding her towards the terrace. It was a gesture of ownership, a gesture that had once belonged to her. The whispers in her own mind were now louder than the buzz of the gala. The puzzle pieces she had refused to look at for so long were snapping into place, forming a picture of betrayal so vast and cruel it stole her breath. And as another more intense cramp seized her, she had a terrible sinking feeling that the evening was about to get much, much worse. The next hour was a blur of polite smiles and empty conversations. Alara moved through the ballroom on autopilot, the twin pains in her back and her heart radiating through her body. She spoke to acquaintances who asked about the nursery, fended off unsolicited advice from older women, and dodged Beatrice's disapproving glares. All the while she was acutely aware of Julian, who had returned from the terrace without Serena, his mood inexplicably buoyant. The main event of the evening was Julian's speech. He was to accept an award for Philanthropist of the Year, a title his PR team had worked tirelessly to secure. As he ascended the stage, the room fell into a reverent silence. A spotlight found him, turning him into a golden, godlike figure. He began by thanking the foundation, the board, and the generous donors. He spoke of legacy, of building a better future, of the responsibility of the fortunate to help the less fortunate. His voice was a rich, captivating baritone, weaving a spell of sincerity over the audience. Alara had heard versions of this speech 100 times, and it always managed to sound convincing. Tonight it sounded like a cacophony of lies. "But a man is nothing without his foundation," Julian said, his eyes scanning the crowd. "He is nothing without the bedrock that supports him, that allows him to build his legacy towards the sky." Alara felt a flicker of hope. Was he talking about her? About their family? Maybe she had been wrong. Maybe Chloe was mistaken. His eyes finally landed on her, and for a moment they held her gaze. But there was no warmth in them, only a cold, calculating glint. A slow, cruel smile spread across his handsome face. "And as many of you know," he continued, his voice dripping with false sentiment, "my own foundation is expanding." A wave of warm, appreciative laughter rippled through the room. People turned to smile at Alara. She felt her cheeks flush, a mixture of embarrassment and a desperate, foolish hope. "My lovely wife Alara is here tonight," he said, gesturing towards her. The spotlight swung from him and settled on her, blinding her. She was pinned a butterfly on a board. "She has been my greatest project, taking her from a simple small-town girl and giving her the world." The tone had shifted. The warmth in the room cooled. The laughter died, replaced by an uncomfortable, uncertain silence. Alara's smile froze on her face. This wasn't a tribute. It was a prelude to an execution. "And now," Julian said, his voice taking on a tone of mock lament, "she is embarking on her own great project, motherhood. She has truly embraced the domestic arts. She has let herself go in the most beautiful way, of course. Swelling with purpose, you might say." A few sycophantic guests chuckled nervously, but most of the room was dead silent, watching the public vivisection with a kind of horrified fascination. He was painting her as a simple brood mare, a bumpkin he had elevated, and who was now fulfilling her rustic biological destiny. He was diminishing her, erasing her identity as an accomplished architect, as his partner in front of everyone they knew. He wasn't done. He leaned closer to the microphone, a conspiratorial glint in his eye. "Some people build empires of steel and glass," he said, pausing for effect. "Others are content to build nurseries. And I, for one, think that is a beautiful, if somewhat limited, ambition. Let's hear it for Elara, everyone. For her, commitment." The applause was sparse, hesitant, and died out almost as soon as it began. The spotlight released her swinging back to Julian as he basked in the aftermath of his cruelty. But Elara barely noticed. She was no longer in the ballroom. She was in a vacuum. The air sucked from her lungs, the world a distant roaring sound in her ears. Every insecurity he had ever cultivated in her, every casual insult, every dismissive gesture had just been weaponized and fired at her in a public forum. He hadn't just insulted her, he had tried to annihilate her. He had redefined her to this entire room as a simple-minded, unambitious vessel for his heir, a project he had completed and was now setting aside. The hot tears she had been fighting all night finally broke free, tracing silent, searing falls down her cheeks. Her whole body trembled, a seismic shudder of grief and rage. And deep within her another more powerful tremor answered. A violent, clenching agony ripped through her abdomen, stealing her breath and making her see stars. This was not Braxton Hicks. This was the raw, primal cry of a body pushed beyond its limits. Her fairy tale had ended. The monster was real. And her baby, her innocent son, had decided he had had enough of living in this gilded cage. He was coming. Now. The world swam back into focus with agonizing slowness. Julian was off the stage accepting congratulations from people who studiously avoided making eye contact with Elara. The jazz quartet started playing again, a frantic attempt to paper over the gaping hole of awkwardness Julian had torn in the evening's fabric. Elara didn't care. The only thing she could focus on was the fire in her belly. Rage, pure and incandescent, burned away her tears, leaving a terrifying clarity in its wake. She had to get to him. She had to confront him. Pushing her chair back, she stood up on shaky legs. Chloe was instantly at her side. "Elara, let's go. I'll get you out of here." "No," Elara said, her voice a low, dangerous growl she didn't recognize as her own. "Not yet." She began to walk, each step a testament to her willpower. The crowd parted before her as if she were a ghost, their faces a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. She kept her eyes locked on Julian, who was laughing with a group of investors, holding his Philanthropist of the Year award like a scepter. He saw her approaching, and his smile faltered for a fraction of a second. He excused himself, turning to meet her in a small alcove, hidden behind a towering floral arrangement. The music and chatter of the gala provided a thin veil of privacy. "What do you think you're doing?" he hissed, his voice stripped of all its public charm. "You're making a scene." "I'm making a scene," she whispered, her voice trembling with suppressed fury. "You just stood on a stage and described your pregnant wife as a quaint little project you're tired of. You humiliated me in front of everyone we know." He had the audacity to look bored. "Oh, for God's sake, Elara, it was a joke. A little roast. You're being overly sensitive. It must be the hormones." "The hormones?" Her laugh was a brittle, broken sound. You stood there talking about building a legacy while you're systematically destroying the only family you have. Is that part of the joke too? This, he said, gesturing vaguely between them, is not my legacy. My legacy is the Thorn global skyline. It's the deals, the power, the name. This is just a chapter, a domestic requirement. The cruelty of his words was so profound, so absolute, that it felt like a physical blow. A domestic requirement. Their marriage, their child, their entire life together reduced to a box he had to check. And Serena Vance, the name slipped from her lips before she could stop it. Is she a domestic requirement too, or is she in the next chapter? Julian's face went rigid. The mask of indifference fell away, replaced by pure, cold rage. You will not speak her name, he seethed, taking a step closer. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're hysterical. I'm not hysterical, she said, her voice rising. I am finally awake. And then it happened. Another contraction, fiercer and more powerful than any before, seized her body. It was a wave of pure agony that buckled her knees. She cried out a raw, involuntary sound of shock and pain. She grabbed his tuxedo jacket for support, her knuckles white. What now? He snapped, trying to pry her fingers off his lapel. More dramatics. But then he followed her horrified gaze downwards. A dark, spreading stain was blossoming on the front of her midnight blue Serafina gown. A sudden warm gush ran down her legs, soaking her shoes and pooling on the polished marble floor. Her water had broken. The moment was so cinematic, so utterly dramatic, that for a second neither of them moved. It was the ultimate, irrefutable biological truth. A visceral, messy reality crashing into Julian's perfectly curated evening. The baby was coming. The domestic requirement was demanding to be met. Elara stared at the puddle at her feet, then up at her husband's face. The anger was gone, replaced by something far worse. Panic and sheer, undisguised disgust. He looked at her, at the evidence of her labor, as if she were something unclean that had just ruined his party. The spell of his power over her was shattered. The last vestiges of love, of hope, of shared history evaporated in that single contemptuous glance. There was no us anymore. There was only her and the baby she would protect with her life, and him a stranger whose cruelty knew no bounds. The breaking point had been reached, and the waters that now pooled on the floor were washing away her old life forever. Chaos erupted in their small, semi-private corner of the gala. A woman who had been standing nearby gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Oh my God! Her water broke." The words cut through the music and chatter like a siren. Heads turned. The murmuring grew louder, more frantic. Julian's perfectly controlled world was imploding in the most public and primal way imaginable. "Do something," Elara gritted out, leaning heavily against the wall as another contraction ripped through her. Julian was frozen, his face a mask of horror. His meticulously planned evening, his moment of triumph, was being literally washed away. He looked trapped, a cornered animal, desperate for an escape route. Chloe pushed through the gathering circle of onlookers, her face a mixture of fury and concern. "Someone call 911, she shouted, taking Elara's arm. "Elara, breathe. Just breathe." "Get her out of here," Julian hissed at Chloe, his voice low and venomous. "Take her through the service entrance. I don't want a scene." "A scene?" Chloe rounded on him, her eyes blazing. "You're worried about a scene. Your wife is in labor. Where the hell is your humanity?" People were closing in their phones, discreetly raised. This was a scandal far more interesting than any silent auction. Julian Thorn, the great philanthropist, the family man, looking at his wife in her moment of ultimate vulnerability, with nothing but cold fury. Panic finally spurred Julian into action, but it was a selfish, desperate panic, focused solely on damage control. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking. I need to manage this. He wasn't calling an ambulance. He wasn't calling his mother. He was scrolling through his contacts, his mind clearly on his business, on the fallout. The pain was immense, but through it, Elara found a pocket of chilling calm. It was the calm of a soldier on a battlefield who knows there's no going back. She watched her husband, the father of the child, fighting its way into the world, and saw with absolute certainty what his priorities were. Don't bother calling your office, Julian, she said. Her voice, though strained, cut through the noise. It was clear and sharp as a shard of ice. Julian froze his thumb, hovering over the screen of his phone. The immediate crowd fell silent, sensing a new act was about to begin in this terrible play. He looked at her, his eyes wide with a warning. Don't you dare. She dared. Fueled by the agony of childbirth and the inferno of his betrayal, she looked him dead in the eye. There's no point in trying to salvage your precious Hudson Yards deal tonight, she said, her voice gaining strength with every word. A collective gasp went through the onlookers. The Hudson Yards deal was the biggest, most contested real estate venture in the city, and Thorn Global Properties was in a bitter final stage battle for it. Elara took a deep, shuddering breath as the contraction began to subside. She then turned her head slightly, her gaze sweeping over the horrified, fascinated faces in the crowd until it landed on one in particular. Serena Vance. Serena had been drawn in by the commotion and was standing near the edge of the circle, her face a perfect porcelain mask of neutrality. But Elara could see the flicker of panic in her cold grey eyes. After all, Elara continued, her voice ringing out in the sudden silence, why don't you just ask your partner for help? She held Serena's gaze. Serena Vance seems to be the one you're building this new future for anyway. I'm sure she can handle the crisis. The name landed like a bomb. The silence that followed was absolute, a deafening void where 100 different realizations dawned at once. The whispers Chloe had heard, the late-night meetings, the hand on the back. It wasn't just an affair. It was a professional conspiracy. Julian Thorn and his biggest rival, Serena Vance, were in bed together, literally and figuratively. He wasn't competing with her for the Hudson Yards deal. He was colluding with her. The public rivalry was a sham, a brilliant, audacious lie to manipulate the market and sideline other competitors. Serena Vance's composure finally shattered. The color drained from her face, leaving her looking stark and skeletal under the ballroom lights. Julian looked between his wife and his mistress, his face a grotesque tableau of rage and utter devastation. He had been exposed, his personal and professional lives detonated simultaneously by the woman he had just tried to erase. Another contraction hit Elara harder this time. She cried out, sinking towards the floor. But Chloe, and surprisingly, an older gentleman she vaguely recognized as Robert Harrison from the MoMA board, caught her. Get this man away from her, Mr. Harrison commanded, glaring at Julian with utter contempt. The unveiling was complete. In the opulent ballroom, surrounded by the city's elite, the truth had been laid bare, not by a whisper, but by the raw, undeniable power of a woman scorned and a baby determined to be born into a world free of its father's lies. The wail of the ambulance siren was a welcome scream, drowning out the frantic, venomous whispers that had consumed the ballroom. The paramedics were efficient and professional, their presence a grounding force in the swirling vortex of drama. They loaded Alara onto a gurney, her blue dress stained and her face pale but resolute. Julian tried to get into the ambulance with her. "I'm her husband," he stated, as if the title still held any meaning. One of the paramedics, a stern-faced woman named Maria, blocked his path. Chloe stood right behind her. "Sir, she's under extreme stress. The doctor inside said only one person can ride with her to minimize agitation. She's asked for her friend." Maria's eyes were like steel. She had clearly assessed the situation in seconds. The look of impotent fury on Julian's face was something Alara would treasure. Defeated, he stepped back as the door slammed shut, leaving him on the curb, bathed in the flashing red and white lights, surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. Inside the ambulance, the ride to Lenox Hill Hospital was a surreal journey through pain and clarity. Between contractions that felt like her body was being torn in two, Chloe held her hand, murmuring words of encouragement, her presence a lifeline. Alara focused on her breathing, on the life force inside her, on the future. A future without Julian. 7 hours later, just as the dirty grey light of dawn began to break over the Manhattan skyline, Leo Alexander Thorne was born. He was small, angry, and perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and his mother's determined eyes. Holding him for the first time, Alara felt a love so overwhelming and pure that it eclipsed all the pain and betrayal. This was her legacy. This tiny, screaming, beautiful boy. Not a building of steel and glass, but a life of flesh and blood. Julian arrived at the hospital hours later. He didn't come to the maternity ward first. He came with his lawyer, a shark named Marcus Finch. They found Alara in her private room, Leo asleep in a bassinet beside her bed. Chloe stood guard, like a sentinel. "Alara," Julian began, his voice devoid of all emotion. "We need to discuss how we're going to handle this." "There is no we, Julian," she said, her voice tired but firm. "And there is nothing to handle other than our divorce." Marcus Finch stepped forward, holding a folder. "Mrs. Thorne, Julian, is prepared to be very generous, provided you sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding his business dealings and personal associations. We can release a joint statement about an amicable separation." Alara started to laugh. It was a raw, weary sound, but it was genuine. An NDA. Amicable. "Julian, did you not see what happened last night? The entire social and financial stratosphere of New York City watched you get exposed. Your personal association with Serena Vance is probably on the cover of the Post by now. The ship of Amicable has sailed, crashed into an iceberg, and sunk to the bottom of the ocean." Julian's face tightened. "Don't be a fool, Alara. Think of your son. You want him to have a comfortable life, don't you? You don't want a protracted, ugly legal battle." It was a threat, plain and simple. "Fight me, and I will ruin you." "What I want," she said, her eyes boring into his, "is for my son to have a mother he can be proud of. One who doesn't roll over and let a bully buy her silence. So you can take your generous offer and your NDA, and you can leave." She looked at her sleeping son. "His name, by the way, is Leo Alexander Reyes. Reyes was my mother's name. He will not carry the name of a man like you." The finality in her voice was absolute. Julian and his lawyer stood there for a moment, stunned into silence by her audacity. She was no longer the quiet, agreeable wife. The woman in this hospital bed was a stranger to them, forged in the fires of public humiliation and childbirth. "You will regret this," Julian snarled as they left. "I will fight you for everything. You will walk away with nothing." The door clicked shut, leaving Alara and Chloe in silence. "Are you sure about this?" Chloe asked softly. "He will make your life hell." Alara looked down at the tiny hand wrapped around her finger. Leo's hand. Her foundation. "He already did," she said. "Now I'm building something new." The aftershocks came quickly. The next day, the Thorn Global Board announced an internal investigation into the Hudson Yards bid. Serena Vance was fired from her firm. The gossip columns were having a field day, painting a lurid picture of corporate espionage and sordid affairs. Julian's philanthropic award was quietly rescinded. A week after Leo was born, a process server delivered the first legal documents to Alara's hospital room. It was a petition for sole custody, citing her emotional instability and public outburst as evidence of her being an unfit mother. The battle had just begun. But for the first time in a very long time, Alara Thorn Reyes felt ready for a fight. 1 year later, Alara stood on a dusty construction site in Brooklyn, a hard hat perched on her head and a roll of blueprints tucked under her arm. The autumn air was crisp, carrying the scent of sawdust and the distant hum of the city. Before her, the steel skeleton of a building rose against the sky, the future site of the Reyes Community Center, a pro bono project she had designed and was now overseeing. Life after Julian was not easy, but it was real. His threats had not been idle. He had unleashed the full force of his legal team, attempting to bury her in motions and depositions. He had frozen their joint assets, forcing her to rely on Chloe, and alone from her estranged but now reconciled family. He painted her in the press as a vengeful, unstable gold digger. But he had made a critical miscalculation. He assumed the woman he was fighting was the same one he had married. He didn't account for the fact that by trying to destroy her, he had stripped away all her fear, leaving only resolve. With the help of a brilliant, tenacious female lawyer, Chloe had recommended Alara fought back. They used the testimony of dozens of gala attendees. They subpoenaed phone records between Julian and Serena. They brought in forensic accountants who uncovered the shell corporations Julian and Serena had created to funnel money and information for their collusive Hudson Yards bid. The custody battle was brutal, but Julian's own arrogance became his undoing. On the stand, his contempt for Alara, his dismissive attitude towards fatherhood, and his blatant narcissism were on full display for the judge. The court awarded Alara sole physical custody of Leo, with Julian granted only supervised visitation, which he rarely used. The divorce settlement, thanks to the evidence of his corporate malfeasance and infidelity, was far from the nothing he had promised her. It was substantial enough for her to start over not in opulence, but in comfort and independence. The Thorn-Vance empire had crumbled as spectacularly as it had been unveiled. Their backdoor deal for Hudson Yards collapsed under the weight of the scandal, and both of them became subjects of a federal investigation into market manipulation. Their affair, deprived of its glamorous high-stakes backdrop, had soured into bitter recriminations. Last Alara heard, they were suing each other. Julian's mother, Beatrice, had retreated from the social scene, her legacy tainted by her son's public disgrace. Alara sold the Park Avenue penthouse, a place that held only ghosts for her now. She bought a charming brownstone in a quiet Brooklyn neighborhood, trading sterile panoramic views for a small backyard with a swing set. Her life was smaller, but infinitely more full. It was filled with the sound of Leo's laughter, the smell of his baby shampoo, and the quiet satisfaction of her own work. She had reopened her own small architectural firm, Reyes Design, focusing on sustainable community-oriented projects, the kind of work that nourished her soul, not just her bank account. As she stood on the construction site, her phone buzzed. It was a picture message from Leo's nanny. He was at the park, sitting in a pile of autumn leaves, a huge, gummy smile on his face. Her heart swelled. That was her empire. That was her skyline. A man walked up beside her, holding 2 cups of coffee. It was Liam, an old friend from her university days, who had been at the gala that night. He was one of the few who had reached out in the aftermath, offering not pity but genuine friendship. He was a landscape architect, and they were collaborating on the community center's garden. "Thought you could use this," he said, handing her a cup. His smile was warm and uncomplicated. "It's looking good, Elara. Really good." "Thanks, Liam," she said, taking a sip. "It's a start." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the welders send sparks into the air as they fortified the building's foundation. Elara thought back to that night at the gala, a lifetime ago. Julian had called her his foundation, the bedrock that supported him. He had been wrong. She had never been his foundation. She had been trapped in his basement. Now she was finally building something on her own ground, something strong, something true, something that was meant to last. And it was beautiful. 3 years passed, in the fast-paced world of New York City. 3 years could be a lifetime. Kuntuku, for Elara it was. Her firm Reyes Design had flourished. She'd earned a reputation for creating spaces that were not just beautiful, but soulful and humane. The Reyes Community Center in Brooklyn was a celebrated success, a vibrant hub of life that had become a model for urban renewal projects. She had won awards, been featured in architectural magazines, and most importantly had built a life of peaceful, joyful stability. Leo was now 4 years old, a whirlwind of energy and laughter, with his mother's bright, curious eyes and a stubborn chin that was all his own. He was the sun around which Elara's universe gracefully orbited. Her relationship with Liam had blossomed into a deep and loving partnership, built on a foundation of mutual respect and easy camaraderie. He was a gentle, steady presence in both her life and Leo's, a man who knew how to build a garden and nurture a family with the same patient hands. The spectre of Julian Thorne had faded. After the public implosion of his Hudson Yards scheme and the ensuing federal investigation, he had paid a massive fine and retreated from the public eye. The Thorne global empire was a shadow of its former self, and Julian, once the king of the city, had become a ghost. Elara had almost allowed herself to believe he was gone for good. But ghosts have a way of reappearing when you least expect them. It was a crisp Saturday in October. Elara, Liam, and Leo were at the playground in Central Park, the one near the carousel. Leo was shrieking with delight as Liam pushed him on the swings higher and higher. Elara sat on a nearby bench, sipping a warm coffee, a contented smile on her face. This simple, perfect moment was everything she had ever fought for. A beautiful family. The voice was unmistakable, smooth, confident, and laced with a familiar poison. Elara's blood ran cold. She turned slowly, her heart hammering against her ribs. Julian Thorne stood there. He looked different, thinner perhaps, with a few more lines etched around his eyes, but still impeccably dressed in a cashmere coat that probably cost more than her car. He wasn't looking at her, but at Leo and Liam, a strange, unreadable expression on his face. "What are you doing here, Julian?" Elara's voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside her. It's a public park, isn't it? He finally turned his gaze to her. He attempted a smile, a practiced, charming gesture that no longer reached his eyes. I wanted to see my son. On the swings, Liam had noticed him. He slowed Leo's arc, his body tensing, his expression becoming guarded. Your supervised visitation is on the first Sunday of the month at the designated center. You know that. You haven't shown up in 6 months. Elara stated, her tone flat and factual. Those places are so sterile, impersonal, he said with a dismissive wave of his hand. I've been doing a lot of work on myself, Elara. Therapy, soul-searching. I realize now how much I lost, how much I pushed away. I just want a chance to be a part of his life. A real part. The words were all correct. They were the words of a changed man. But Elara had spent years studying the nuances of Julian's manipulations. She could see the performance. He was an actor playing a role, and he was watching her intently, gauging her reaction. Liam brought a now quiet Leo over to the bench. Leo, who had only ever seen his biological father in pictures and during a few awkward early visitations, hid behind Liam's legs, peering out with suspicion. Leo, this is Julian, Elara said softly, her protective instincts screaming. You must be Liam, Julian said, extending a hand. His smile was wide, but his eyes were chips of ice. Thank you for stepping in. The words were meant to sound gracious, but they were a clear assertion of territory, a reminder that Liam was merely a replacement. Liam shook his hand briefly, his grip firm. I'm not stepping in. I'm part of this family. An awkward silence descended. Julian crouched down to Leo's level. Hello, Leo. I'm your father. Leo just stared, his thumb finding its way into his mouth. I have something for you, Julian said, pulling a small, elegantly wrapped box from his coat pocket. It was a miniature functioning replica of a vintage Aston Martin, a toy so extravagant and out of place for a playground that it was almost comical. Leo looked at the toy, then at his mother. Elara gave a slight, almost imperceptible shake of her head. This was a transaction, not a gift. He doesn't need toys, Julian. He needs a father who shows up, she said, her voice quiet but unyielding. Julian's mask of contrition slipped for a second. A flicker of his old, cold anger flashed in his eyes before he masked it again. He stood up, sighing dramatically. I know I have a lot to make up for. That's why I'm here. I'd like to start spending more time with him. Real time. Here at the park. Maybe take him to a museum. We can discuss it through our lawyers, Elara said, standing up. Come on, Leo. It's time to go. Elara, please, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Don't do this. Don't punish me through him. I'm trying to make amends. For all of us. His sudden plea for sympathy was so audacious, so manipulative, that it almost took her breath away. But as he spoke, she noticed something. A man, sitting on a bench across the green, seemingly reading a newspaper. But the paper was angled just so, and the long lens of the camera tucked beside him was aimed directly at them. The truth hit her like a physical blow. This wasn't about Leo. This wasn't about amends or soul-searching. This was a photo-op. Julian was staging his redemption. The fallen mogul's heartbreaking reunion with his estranged son. It was a calculated PR move to rebuild his shattered image, and he was using their child as a prop. The last shred of her doubt vanished, replaced by a cold-hard fury. The echo of the man who had humiliated her at the gala was standing right here performing the same kind of public manipulation. Only this time the stage was a children's playground. She scooped Leo into her arms, holding him tight. "Get away from us, Julian," she said, her voice low and dangerous. "And tell your photographer he can go home." She turned and walked away, Liam at her side, leaving Julian standing alone by the swings with his expensive unwanted toy. He didn't call after her. The performance was over. His audience was leaving, and the mask had fallen completely. She could feel his silent, venomous rage following her all the way out of the park. She knew with a chilling certainty that this was not the end. It was a declaration of a new kind of war. The staged photos appeared online the next day on a notorious gossip blog. Julian Thorne, a changed man, trying to reconnect with his son, only to be coldly rebuffed by his bitter ex-wife and her new lover. The narrative was expertly crafted, painting him as a victim and her as the villain. It was a classic Julian move. If you can't win the truth, rewrite the story. For a few days, the story gained traction, and Alara felt the familiar sting of public judgment. But this time, she was not alone, and she was not silent. Her lawyer issued a concise, brutal statement detailing Julian's 6-month absence from scheduled visitations and the convenient presence of a paparazzi photographer at his spontaneous park visit. Public opinion, already wary of Julian, swung swiftly and decisively back against him. The attempt to use his son for PR backfired, making him look even more monstrous and calculating than before. It was the last straw. Enraged and publicly humiliated once again, Julian came for her. Not with lawyers or photographers, but with the raw, desperate fury of a king who had lost his kingdom and his power. He showed up at the grand reopening of the Reyes Community Center. It was the center's 3rd anniversary, and the event was a celebration of everything Alara had built. The main hall, a soaring space of reclaimed wood, exposed brick and vast windows she had designed, was filled with neighborhood families, local leaders, and the joyful noise of children. Alara was on a small stage, thanking the community with Liam and a happy tuxedo-clad Leo beside her. And then she saw him. Julian was standing at the back of the room, a thunderous expression on his face. He began to walk forward, his presence sucking the warmth and joy out of the air. The crowd parted, a wave of unease rippling through the room. He stopped at the foot of the small stage, looking up at her. "This is quite the little empire you've built," he said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "All on my money, of course. You should be thanking me." Alara's heart pounded, but her voice was calm as she spoke into the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," she said to the stunned crowd. "It seems we have one final unscheduled donor to acknowledge." She handed Leo to Liam, who gently led him to the side, shielding him. She stepped down from the stage to face Julian on the floor on his level. She was no longer looking down on him, nor was she cowering beneath him. They were for the first time equals. "You have nothing, Julian," she said, her voice low enough that only he could hear. "Your money didn't build this. This was built with talent and hard work. It was built with integrity. Concepts you wouldn't understand." "Integrity?" He scoffed, his voice rising. "Don't you dare preach to me about integrity. I picked you up from nothing. You were a small town girl with a portfolio of quaint little drawings. I gave you a name. I gave you a life. I gave you a son, and you threw it all away. You didn't give me anything, Julian. You tried to cage me," she corrected him, her gaze unwavering. "You thought I was a project you could build and then abandon like one of your glass towers. But you made a mistake. You thought my foundation was you. You were wrong." She gestured around the room, at the children, laughing at the families, talking at the vibrant art on the walls. This is my foundation. Truth, community, love. Things you can't buy or bully or manipulate. You stand here in a house that truth built, and you are a ghost. Your empire was a house of cards Julian built on lies and secrets. It was destined to fall. He stared at her, his face contorted with a rage so profound it seemed to vibrate. He had come here for a final public showdown, expecting to shatter her with his presence, to remind her of his power. But his words had no effect. His anger was a storm breaking against a sea wall. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. She pitied him. In her calm, pitying eyes, Julian Thorne finally saw his own defeat. It wasn't a legal loss or a financial one. It was a total spiritual annihilation. He had no power here. He had no power over her. He was irrelevant. Without another word, he turned and stalked out of the building. No one watched him go. The life of the party, the community immediately swelled to fill the space he had vacated, the joyful noise returning as if he had never been there at all. Elara watched the door swing shut behind him, and for the first time she felt the last heavy chain of her past fall away. Liam came to her side, his hand finding hers. Leo ran to her, wrapping his small arms around her legs. She looked around the beautiful, bustling room she had designed, at the smiling face of the man she loved, and at the bright, hopeful eyes of her son. She had once been the silent, pregnant wife, publicly shamed at a gala. Now she was the celebrated architect of her own life, standing strong in the house she had built, not from the ashes of her old life, but on a brand new, unshakable foundation of her own making. The story wasn't about him anymore. It was, and always had been, about her. Elara's story is a powerful reminder that sometimes our greatest breakdowns lead to our most profound breakthroughs. The night that should have been her ultimate humiliation became the moment of her liberation. She walked through the fire of public betrayal and emerged not as a victim, but as the architect of her own new life. Her journey from the gilded cage of Park Avenue to a place of true self-worth and happiness is a testament to the incredible strength that lies within us, often waiting for a crisis to be unleashed. If Elara's journey from heartbreak to empowerment moved you, please show your support by hitting the like button and sharing this video with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe and click the notification bell so you don't miss our next story. In the comments below, tell us, have you ever witnessed a moment where the truth exploded in the most public way possible? We'd love to hear your story. Thank you for listening.